Before we get right into part 8 of the review of the Chris Watts interrogation, I need to say something that I should say more often, but you've probably noticed by now I'm not the typical social media personality of, "What's up, guys? Don't forget to smash that like button and make sure you subscribe." Yeah, that's not going to happen. But I am very thankful that you took a chance on the amateur looking thumbnail and stuck with a video of just a guy talking. Where's the footage? And I've been loving all the likes, the subscriptions. I read all the comments. At first, I thought I could respond to all the comments and quickly found out I couldn't. If you're one of the brave souls who trickled over to my other videos, you saw the traffic I'm used to dealing with. And I feel like I'm shortchanging people by not giving them as long of a reply as they're writing to me. But they're great to see. I love reading them, and I'm glad you guys are talking to each other, because at the heart of this matter is willful ignorance, and keeping these subjects in people's minds to notice red flags is the first step towards preventing it from happening, really. Because imagine if some jerk in Chris Watts' life had said, "You strike me as the kind of guy that would murder his family." Maybe he wouldn't have done it. Maybe he would have said, "Oh, someone's on to me. I'll save it for later when this guy's not in my life anymore." So I've kind of fallen into a pattern of, I will heart your compliment or your comment if it's really nice and informative and complimentary. I'll give it the heart. If it's something that I can't 100% endorse, but I'm glad that you're contributing to the conversation, I'll just give it the thumbs up. But I can't quite endorse what you're saying or about who you're saying it. But I'm glad you're contributing, thumbs up. And maybe somewhere down the road, when I have more time, I'll reply to all the comments when everyone else has moved on, and they're like, "When did I write this comment? I don't even remember." Or maybe we can do a Q&A video. Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to smash that like button and make sure you subscribe. So anyway, thank you all. And thank you to patron Jody Long. You're a brave soul as well. Where we left off was Chris acting like, in a joking way, he blamed his weight gain on Celeste, and we covered how he legitimately believes that and is the reason for him to absolve himself of responsibility, and also why he would carry so much hate for other human beings who love and trust him that he could end their lives. And if you're still on the fence about that, Tammy moves him into his family history, and we see the pathology of that mindset. Because Chris comes to the part where he moved out of his family's house when he was 18. And he feels the need to throw in the detail that since he never moved back into his house after he was 18, his father started using drugs because their son moved out of the house at the appropriate, responsible age of 18 and had their life together enough that they didn't need to move back. Now, usually when a family member starts using drugs and it's a problem, that is the most dysfunctional part of the story. But in this case, it's only the third most dysfunctional element to this story. Behind number 2, the fact that Chris's parents actually tried to blame Chris's dad's drug use on their son acting responsible to move out of the house at the appropriate age of 18 and never needing to move back because his life was in order. That is the goal of most parents, to get their children ready so that they can start their own life independently at the age of 18. Chris had reached that point, and his parents decided to blame the father's drug use on the fact that he was showing responsibility and becoming a mature adult. So it wasn't And Chris mentions it here. What is it, 10 years later? No, 15 years later. He feels the need to bring it up because of the by far most dysfunctional element of this whole story. Chris chose to believe it. He was a responsible enough man to start his own life independent from his family at the age of 18. That's good. But dysfunctional enough that he would say, wow, I'm such a great guy that when I moved out of the house at 18, my dad couldn't cope with that. I guess he just wasn't capable of that. So it just shows how he chooses to believe his own lies and how he believes other lies to feed his narcissism. So when he's 18, his father is blaming his own drug use on Chris moving out. And then 15 years later, Chris is blaming his weight gain on his unborn daughter making his wife pregnant. So it doesn't make sense on the surface of it, but when you look into the history, Tammy really uncovered a nugget there, didn't she? One of the seeds to this dysfunctional mindset. So we see now why, if this was an essay, his master thesis would be, despite the fact that Shanann was so mean, I'm a great guy. Because we go into Chris's history of his relationship with Shanann next. And think about that. It was an 8-year relationship, and he can pick out of the thousands of days they were together, hundreds of different events, so many memories. Had to be good times, otherwise why are you with her? But most of the stories that he chooses to tell Tammy paint Shanann in a negative light, even when he's on the surface of it saying it in a kind of a husband joking about his dysfunctional wife, but we know that he really means it. And why is he choosing to say, yeah, when I first met Shanann, she said my shorts looked awful, but I went with her to her doctor's appointment. And then Shanann said my hair looked awful, and I let her lay on my lap for 2 hours on the drive home. That's kind of his thesis statement for his relationship with Shanann, is despite the fact that Shanann was so mean all the time, I was great. Well, what about all the times she was nice to you? Why were you with her if that's all you saw is these sniping comments and you don't bring up any of the good times? Why were you with her for 8 years? So, since Chris's history is wildly one-sided to paint himself as such a good guy, allow me to tell Shanann's side of the history of their relationship. At the darkest time of Shanann's life, she went slumming and settled for a guy who looks like the illegitimate son of Ryan Gosling in a xenomorph with that melting temples and the... You know what he looks like when he's looking at Tammy, and especially later on when his mask is starting to come off and he's really falling apart? He reminds me of like the boy from a family of cannibals that lives in the mountains, and occasionally a straggler will come across their cabin, be invited in for dinner, and end up becoming the dinner. Well, one day a little Chrissy boy wandered a little too far away from the mountain cabin and collapsed by the highway, where Shanann found him, took pity on him, and brought him in, decided to civilize him, dressed him up in nice clothes, taught him how to do dishes, talked him into not selling things for less than they were worth, got him to take a shower once in a while, civilized him. And she may have taken the boy out of the mountain, but she never really took the mountain out of the boy. Because 8 years later, Chris is sitting in an interrogation room with his jaw hanging out and looking under his brow at Tammy, and his temples melting and saying, I had nothing to do with the disappearance. Yeah, that's another thing, the mouth noises. Someone mentioned this in the comments, and I was like, I'm going to talk about that today. He does these mouth noises that whenever he's trying to remember something, he will do what I just did, the Tuesday. And why that's significant is because Tammy's endurance through this interrogation rivals Stephen McDaniel's for endurance in an interrogation. Maybe surpasses him. If you don't know Stephen McDaniel, he's the murderer who sat completely still in the interrogation room for hours. When they would tell him to look at them, he would look at them and wouldn't move his head for hours. When they would say, put your hands on the table, he would put his hands on the table and not move them for hours. And he would only say yes, no, and I don't know to everything. And Tammy's endurance in this interrogation, to sit there and take in all these lies for hours from a guy who she knows is guilty of making his family go missing, probably by murder, and to maintain, it might be more difficult. The degree of difficulty is much higher because she's getting pummeled with deception and dishonesty. Everything that Chris says other than, I did it and here's where they are, is deception. And it shows an incredible amount of disrespect to the person you're lying to. And she's just taken all that and still acting like the friendly, sweet, innocent helper who's leading him through this interrogation and polygraph before we send you on your way and you can move on. And she never breaks, and she just keeps asking these sweet, innocent questions and getting him to reveal himself, really, and exposing him. And she can put up with all of that, but by the third or fourth time that Chris does one of those mouth noises to try to remember something, she interrupts him. She can't take that. So it's like, let's see, I think I brought them there. Just, no, that's okay, don't do it. I got it. Just go back to, could you make your family disappear by tying them up in a sack and throwing them in a river? Let's talk about that instead. Well, I think you could, never mind. Let's talk about, she couldn't take that, but she could take him pummeling her with lies for hours on end and never break character. But she had to cut him off because of the mouth noises. So that's an interesting thing to remember, valuable thing to remember. If you've been with a significant other for a long time, they're probably putting up with stuff like that, these annoying little things. And you might forget about that after so much time. I think Chris forgot about it because he's doing it here, not realizing it's annoying. And I don't know whether Shanann actually put up with it. Maybe she put up with it for a few years and then said, Chris, the mouth noises, I just can't take him anymore. Can you please stop? And maybe he stopped like a good little boy that he always pretended to be. And then maybe when he came across the mistress and he did it for the first time in front of her, she was like, whoa, those mouth noises you do when you're remembering things is trippy. That's cute. I like it. And then that filled up his ego again. He's like, I love her and not my wife. So I bet, but as we've talked about, we'll probably talk about it more later, the mistress was getting ready to dump him. And I bet that was one of the things that got on her nerves. Like by the third or fourth time, she was like, oh, is he going to do those mouth noises every time he's remembering something? I can't take this anymore. This is boring now. I think Chris got to a point where he forgot he's imperfect. And the mouth noises that the murder investigator is talking about and interrupting him because she can't take them anymore is indicative of that. And Chris tells the story of at the party the night before the murders, I think it was, or where Cece put the water balloon in his pocket and popped it. And we know he says it like, yeah, she put a water balloon in my pocket and just went psh, and popped it right in my pocket. So that was funny. And the way he feels the need to add that was funny at the end, it's almost like he realizes this is going to come across as something that made him mad enough to get rid of her, because that is how it comes across. especially to an FBI interrogator. So we had to add that was funny to hold up the mask of I'm just a nice, loving family man who's joking around. No one would ever really do that. No one would ever really call that their primary motivation. But we also know that Chris made the call that he would go to Survey 319 the next day alone. And we know that that's where he disposed of his beautiful family the next day. So that all gives me the impression that Cece, he stood there and watched Cece do that, let her do it, and then after she laughed and went away, maybe he acted like, haha, that was funny, Cece. Opening up his phone and calling to arrange that he would be there alone the next day, thinking about what he was going to do. And in his head, that made him get the upper hand on them. Cece is the second unsung hero. I talked about some of the unsung heroes I haven't heard get any credit yet. Cece is the second, along with Bella, for about the same reason. She woke up too after her father's attempted murder. And she checked on her sister, and we know that Cece was a lot more rambunctious and outgoing than Bella. So when she joined Bella in this horrible situation, she probably was even more of a distraction to Chris. And she deserves just as much credit as Bella as an unsung hero for stopping Chris and leading to him getting caught. Cece is a hero. And I don't think we have time to go into another one, so see you in part 9.